Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And I hope you like it weird, because whoo boy, have I got a weird one for you today. We are talking about the latest studio album, the sophomore studio album from Melted Bodies, entitled Inevitable Fork. And full disclosure, it is sonically one of the weirdest, one of the strangest, one of the funkiest metal albums of 2024. Now don't get it twisted, I fully stand by my claim that Vita Blue from Mama Leak is the weirdest metal album of 2024, but if we were in the Olympics, that would be getting the gold medal, and this would be getting the silver medal. Don't ask me who gets bronze, I have no fucking clue. Okay, maybe Folter Calmer. Anyways, let's talk about Melted Bodies, an American alternative, industrial, and experimental metal crew, and the brainchild, really, of one Andy Hamm, who was at one point in time, many a year ago, a founding member and bassist of another band, American indie rock and alternative rock crew, Local Natives. And apparently, in 2015, as the story I'm reading from goes, he was looking at his two favorite records, The Bleeding from Cannibal Corpse and More Songs About Buildings and Food from Talking Heads, and he literally just went, what if I just kind of combined these things together? What if I just emulsified them into a weird new sonic thing? And thus Melted Bodies was conceived, and once Andy surrounded himself with like-minded music weirdos, Melted Bodies was officially born. Now, they haven't really done, a lot just yet. They're not the biggest or most well-known band out there right now, but they have built a reputation for just being kind of zany and bonkers and off the wall with their music and also with their live shows. They turned a lot of heads back in 2020 with the release of their official debut album, Enjoy Yourself. I remember it getting a glowing review from Metal Injection especially. They've been building up hype and anticipation for this album for a couple of years now. It's been released kind of already in bits and pieces through a bunch of different EPs, which I've never really talked about because I wanted to wait until the full album was out and available, but I have listened to some of these songs along the way, and I've really enjoyed them. And now I've got the full album, and I've spent a lot of time with it, and as I mentioned earlier in the review, whoo boy! For real though, I don't even know where to begin describing the sound and the feel of this record. Sonically, it's clusterfuckian in nature. It's a smorgasbord of crazy sounds and influences that are reminiscent of everyone from Primus to Mindless Self-Indulgence to Skinny Puppy, a little bit of B-52s and Devo, I would even say, in some parts. Ministry comes to mind. A variety of projects from Mike Patton and Serge Tankian come to mind as well. Pumping, pulsing, glaring electronics and synthesizers and wild, erratic, Greg Puciato-style vocal outbursts everywhere. Lots of mean, muscular, groovy, and simultaneously technical, jagged, complex, and unorthodox beats and riffage, plus also scattered across the album a variety of interludes with ominous textures and soundscapes and spoken word style poetry of sorts with contributions from Angela So of Shushu fame. And the whole thing is 70 minutes long, and it talks about loneliness and the struggles of daily life and anxiety and depression. It's a lot. I wouldn't blame you if you just immediately heard all of this and went, that's overwhelming. I want nothing to do with this. Honestly, valid. I get it. And in fact, on my very first listen, I was personally a little overwhelmed and not really feeling it. Not 100% at least. It doesn't help that the production sometimes makes everything busier and more chaotic than it really needs to be. There's so many noisy, grating guitars, so many different electronics, so many wild vocal displays and so many riffs and beats. It's a lot. But I think if you're willing to stick with it as I did, then I think you're going to end up really enjoying yourself. I think this could be a really cathartic and entertaining experience. Bloodlines, for instance, is a hard-hitting kind of industrial alt-metal banger with a lot of headbanging riffs and big drums, a lot of synths, a lot of crazy nonsense in general. It's well-produced, though, and it's very cohesive. It's reminiscent of something that Tim Skold would have put together back in the day, honestly. And the way that it handles generational trauma, learning from the past and looking inwards in this very garish and out there kind of way, I think is also really interesting and effective. Then there's the Avalanche, which really does feel like an avalanche to a certain extent. It has these very slow, very heavy, sludgy guitars, caked in static and feedback, huge explosions of emotion and pain and regret, moaning vocals. It's an absolutely massive and miserable cut. Then there's Wrath of the Flies, which honestly brings to mind the kind of like demented industrial extreme metal that I would have heard from like the Berserker or like Agoraphobic Nosebleed back in the day, albeit if they went in more of like a groovy death metal direction of sorts, I guess. State of Mind is a cool cut as well, very immersive and trancy with a psychedelic feel and vibe to it, lots of flourishing synths and electronics, monotonous vocals, some simple guitar strumming as well, providing a lot of atmosphere. Even when we transition into some heavier, bigger, louder territory, it's very effective, it's very well done. And Talk Some More About It is great too. Very tender, very warm, very simple, very dreamy with a lot of acoustic guitars and a lot of like soft-spoken vocals. And it does eventually add some more keyboards and synths, but you know, it never really goes into hyper crazy heavy territory. With that all said though, my favorite track is honestly Think Safe. It's one of the most clever cuts on the record, kind of managing to find like that ooey gooey sweet spot in between like early 80s new wave and like cheeky kind of like pop and rock from like Devo and the B-52s, and like also more hard-hitting, thumping, technical, complex kind of like industrial and alt metal. And not every track is a knock out of the fucking park. The Inevitable Fork, for instance, the album's title track, is a little bit too long, and to its credit, it does have a bunch of different like phases and such, a bunch of different segments, but I don't know, I just don't find it as effective. I also think that tracks like Splitting and Therapy, though still entertaining to an extent, could benefit from being a little bit more poignant and a little bit more ambitious and clever. And while some of the interludes are interesting, some of them are grating and obnoxious and feel kind of aimless to me. This is by no means a seamless or perfect record. It has some bloat, it's a little bit too chaotic and overwhelming and overstimulating, and sometimes the production kind of makes it sound like a bunch of fucking bricks thrown into a washing machine. But I think the good outweighs the bad, or, you know, not even bad, just like the not as good. So I think with this in mind, I will give it a 3 out of 5, an enthusiastic one at that, like leaning towards a 3.5 out of 5, and simultaneously I will caution some that, you know, this record is a lot, and you maybe don't want to rush into it, and also I totally understand if like a couple songs into it you're like, I don't get it, it's not for me. Anybody who's in the mood for an album that is just weird and over the top and emotionally draining, I think is going to have a fucking field day with this. No doubt in my mind there is an audience out there that is ready and even hungry for something like this. I think in the future, I'd want to see Melted Bodies pull back just a little bit. I'd want something just a little bit more cohesive. But, you know, it is what it is. Melted Bodies made the album that they felt they needed to make, and for the most part, it does work. So, very enthusiastic 3 to 5. Yeah, it's kind of messy, but it is kind of a fun, interesting mess at least. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I am not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. Wow. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.